Hello, everyone. It's Larry Gordon here at the offices of the Five Towns Jewish Times, and our very special guest in Jerusalem, I guess, is where you're speaking to me from home.
Absolutely.
Is Mathew Miller, the owner, the impresario, the man behind the magic of Koren Publishing. And it's great to make your acquaintance. I have some of your books in my office and the Machzer at my home. And the Five Towns Jewish Times has a great relationship with Koren. We publish a lot of newspapers and distribute over a wide area. And turns out that our target market is probably overlaps with your market. So it's a good, as they say in Jewish life. So I did some checking around on the internet about the history of Koren. And I understand that you're only the owner for the last, 10 years or more?
15 years.
15 years.
I bought it in 2007.
2007. So who is, you refer to the original owner as Mr. Koren. Can you tell me who that was?
Yeah, the original owner was Mr. Koren, and he had a partner, the Kahn family. The Kahns were the business partners, and Mr. Koren was the creative partner, the designer, and
in Israel?
Spirit. In Israel, oh yeah. They were part of that. Mr. Koren was part of that. Let's call it the heroic generation of 1948, and he escaped from Germany. Well, he left Germany in 1933. Worked for the Jewish Agency in the graphics department. He designed the symbol of the city of Jerusalem, and after the War of Independence, he had this. Well, I don't know if you're aware, but for about 450 years, all Hebrew editions of the Tanakh were based on the Catholic Bomberg edition of the early 16th century. There were some earlier Jewish edited texts during, from say about 1450 to about 1500, but by 1500 the church clamped down. Mm-hmm. And since then, all texts were based on that Bomberg edition. Koren had the idea, and he enlisted people like Rov Maidan's father and the Goldhabers to create a new edited Jewish text, first time in 450 years, which came out in 1962. And it was a huge event. They went back to the oldest, at that time, the oldest available manuscript, which was the Leningrad Codex. Mm-hmm. And they re-edited and made thousands of corrections throughout the Tanakh. And that's been the quasi-official Tanakh of the land of Israel since that time.
It's amazing. It's amazing the transition in communication that we've lived through in the last few decades. It seems to me it was basically the same for probably hundreds of years. And then once the printing press was introduced into the system, I mean, we're recording this a few days after Tisha B'Av. We were talking the other day in the office about the burning of the Talmud by King Louis IX. In
1290, I think
it was. I don't know exact year, but it was a couple of hundred years before the printing press was invented. So these are all original manuscripts. When you think, it's right. When you think in contemporary terms of Gemaras being built, being burned, you go to Judaica store and you buy a new one. In the Daf Yomi cycle, if you can't find your Gemara from 7.5 years ago, you go buy a new one. But here, the handwritten ones were, like you said, they were wiped out and they were gone, and everything had to be built from scratch again. So,
interestingly, when Bomberg, under the church auspices, brought out his edition of the Talmud, that froze a lot of stuff. Manuscripts of the Talmud during the medieval period, each one was different. There was like a fluidity of commentaries, and it froze it. What happened when Bomberg did his Tanakh, it froze the mistakes.
So that became the tradition.
And Koren was revolutionary in reestablishing the authentic text.
That was in when? In the 1960s?
It was throughout the 1950s, but it was published in 1962.
That's an amazing story. You know, I read about on Sunday on Tisha B'Av. I read about the Louis IX, as I mentioned, and how he was the church was so impressed with him that they made him a saint, so he became Saint Louis. You know, so I'll never look at the St. Louis Cardinals again the same. I don't think. You know, either the baseball team or the football team. If they're still a St. Louis Cardinals football team, I'm not sure. They moved to Los Angeles, right? Anyway, but so you have common contact. Let me talk about you for a minute, and I want to talk about some of the authors that you've come in contact with and published over the years. You mentioned in one of the things that I read about you is that you've been chasing a dream for the last few decades that took you from the United States to England to Israel.
That's a pretty romantic version of it.
Those are your words.
Well, yeah. Okay, I must have been on a flight of fancy.
So where'd you start out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Brooklyn.
Really?
Where else? Where else?
I don't know. That's where the ship docked.
What?
That's where a lot of the ships docked.
Yeah, and I spent about 20 years in England. I went over for 6 months. Went to university there, came back, and then went over for 6 months to work to basically shut down or build up a company, which I built up. I told my wife we're going for 6 months, and she doesn't believe me anything anymore. And then when the company was sold, I was wonderfully out of a job. So I thought, okay, let's make Aliyah. This is it. And I was always fascinated by publishing. It's something it was always something I wanted to be involved with, and I did. And I started Toby Press, which Yehuda Avner is the prime minister's.
Yes.
That was a very big. That was a wonderful success. Yehuda was a wonderful.
Yes, I've heard him speak.
Oh, he was a force of nature. And I heard, because I lived in England for so long, everybody knows everybody in England. It's a small Jewish community. I got to know Rabbi Sachs a little bit. I knew he was looking for a Jewish publisher, as opposed to, say, a trade publisher like, Random House or something like that. And I knew that by that time, Koren had dwindled. They didn't really they brought out in the 70s, they brought out some Sidurim and some Machzorim. But since the 70s, they hadn't brought out anything new. And it was only 3 people. But I thought, it pushed all my buttons. It was academically at the highest level. And I'm a wannabe academic. The design is magnificent, which I have always been partial to. Right. And it's a Zionist enterprise. So I thought we could combine the excellence of Koren with the excellence of Rabbi Sachs and do something with it. And after about 2 years, so I bought in 2007. 2000 took us about a couple of years to get organized. And we brought up the Siddur, the Koren Sachs Siddur in 2009. And it was wonderfully successful, and the Machzorim followed. And we've been on a roll ever since.
So, I mean, there were two. We lost great personalities in the last few years. Rabbi Sachs, of course, and Adin Steinsaltz as well. Sure. Were they the most prolific or innovative and creative thinkers that you've come in contact with, that we would be familiar with? Would you say? Yes,
but I want to qualify that yes. Rabbi Steinsaltz was incredibly prolific. I mean, we have published our Koren Talmud Bavli is based on his, and it's an excellent, innovative work.
How's that different? How's that different? How's his Talmud Bavli different from what anybody else publishes?
Well, what it is when you open it, and I wish I don't have it in front of me. When you open it from the Hebrew side, you get a complete Daf Vilna Minukad, which is very helpful. When you open it from the English side, what you do is you get a full we repeat the translation with a full English translation, with the bold and the non-bolded, but 4-color throughout. And it has the personalities, the halachot, the typical Steinsaltz realia that he adds in, which makes it much more engaging to use. So you have the text, and we want to graduate you over to using the Vilna side itself. We published his Mishnah that's coming out now. We've published probably hundreds of volumes of Rabbi Steinsaltz. Rabbi Sachs was prolific in a different kind of way. Remember, he had another job. He was chief rabbi for the UK and the Commonwealth. But he always set aside 3 months in the summer, 2 months in the summer to do the next book. So we've probably got about 20 of his books in print. We're publishing his backlist now. So yes, the first answer to your question, the first answer is yes, they were incredibly prolific. Having said that, we are working with a lot of new authors, young authors, both in the States, England, and Israel. One thing we've done is, we publish Rabbi Sachs in Hebrew. We're publishing a lot of brilliant Israeli academics and rabbinic figures in English. So I think we're trying to prepare the next generation.
So let's switch over to the business side of all this. Communications has changed dramatically in the last couple of decades, or even less than that. Everything's online and social media. And I know from my perspective as a publisher of a newspaper, newspapers are closing in the United States, they say at 2 a week. But somehow the price of paper still keeps going up for some reason, even though there's less and less papers being published.
Because it's all going into boxes for Amazon.
I don't know where they're going, but I started to say that I forgot what I was going to start to say, but let's from the business perspective, what is the market like? Where is the strongest market? Is it Israel? Is it the United States? Is it New York specifically? Is it Europe?
It splits roughly evenly between what we call our English market and our Hebrew market, roughly 50-50. It depends on which new books come out this year, which new titles come out, the exchange rate. It's been all over the place. It's gone from the shekel 3 to the dollar to the 4 to the dollar since I met Aliyah. It's all over the place. They're roughly equal. I think this year Israel is a little bit ahead of America. Last year was the other way around. No, they're pretty close.
So a sitter is a fundamental piece of equipment in Jewish life. So, I mean, could you put a number on the number of Koren Sidurim that are in circulation?
Oh, gosh. Since 1970?
Well, no, since you took over, you updated it. It has a very sharp look. Has, I don't know if it's just me, but I'm a connoisseur of fonts. I think it has a great font, that catches your attention right away.
Pretty close to 1 million, I guess. Because don't forget, we're publishing this of course, in English. We publish in Hebrew. We're the official Siddur of the German Orthodox Rabbinate. We publish it in German. We publish it in Norwegian. Okay, that wasn't so much. We're publishing it for the UK. So many hundreds of thousands. I suppose I should count them up.
So, what is the American market like for you? Is it more competitive than Israel or Europe? The more publishers here?
Okay, let's talk about America and Israel, because the European countries are so Jewish-wise so small. Of course, they're competitive. There are different types of competition. In America, you have, pretty much the overwhelming majority is Nusach Ashkenaz. In Israel, most Ashkenaz daven Nusach Sfard. Jerusalem tends to be more Ashkenaz, Nusach Ashkenaz, and each Sephardi group has their own Nusach. If you're from this part of Morocco, you have this one. If you have that part of Morocco, we publish now the bilingual edition for Kol Yaakov, the Syrian minhag. There's really two. There's Damascus and Aleppo. So it's much more fragmented in Israel.
So it's the same market, but it's all very, very diverse. It sounds like everybody having different, deep, different customs. So you started talking about some of the authors on the scale of Rabbi Sachs or Rabbi Steinsaltz.
Yeah, I mean, for example, Rabbi Foreman. We worked very closely with Rabbi Foreman and Rabbi Rosner. Rabbi Foreman was publishing his own under Alpha Beta. Now we've joined forces. Mm-hmm. So we're doing an awful lot of books with Rabbi Foreman. Currently in the forthcoming, Rabbi Wiederblank, obviously Rabbi Sachs. We're delighted that we're going to be publishing Rav Herschel Schachter's forthcoming book. We work very closely with YU and have done for the last, since I became involved with Koren.
What are you publishing of Rav Schachter's?
It's a new book on the oral law.
It's a commentary.
No, it's a commentary. No. It's not a commentary. It's his. I haven't read it yet.
Okay.
It's still very much in the editorial stage, but it's on the oral law, development of the oral law.
So one of the interesting things I heard you say is you've observed how the language has changed over the years. I heard you say, I saw a video of a speech you gave where you said that words like tweet and settle and fundamental don't mean the same thing that they did a few decades ago, or maybe just a few years ago. Do you remember that? Do you remember that? You said tweet is something a sound a bird used to make, fundamental used to be something basic. Now it's like a criticism of a person that's some kind of a zealot or extremist.
I guess I'm a pretty radical fundamentalist.
It depends how the word is used.
Yeah, no, I mean it is used as a slur. If you're a fundamentalist, that means your brain checked out. I mean that's just nonsense. It's a derisory way of saying we have fundamental core beliefs. We have to hold those beliefs. It's desperately important. It's for ourselves to hold those beliefs. And, what the other side. Yeah. I was in Egypt in January with Rabbi, oh gosh, I'm just having a senior moment. And we went, basically it was a deep roots trip. Mm-hmm. When you look at say for Bereshit or say for especially if you look at Exodus, the language is so in place from Egypt that you can't not be a fundamentalist. Mm-hmm. Things that are in say for Shemot can only have come from Egypt. They can't have come from a later period. The more you learn, the more you learn about the context, the more you realize it's how true it is.
Well, the whole
Rabbi Josh Berman. Sorry,
Josh Berman. The fascinating aspect of studying Torah from any source is the meaning of words and just pages and pages of commentary and discussion about what certain words mean, and even here in the United States, especially this day and age where the meaning of words are being distorted. I've always felt that whether it's in the Trump administration or the Biden administration today, there must be somebody in the chain of power that went to yeshiva one day and learned Gemara in the 5th or 6th or 7th grade and then went to public school after that. But he remembers there's a way to think that can take the simple meaning of words into a new direction. So like we said before we went on before we started recording, as the publisher, I mean, you're responsible for everything that goes into all these books. And obviously you're not going to, I don't think you're going to tell me that you read every single word of every single book, or did you?
Of course not.
Of course not.
No, I've got some very brilliant editors. Ruben Ziegler is our editorial director. And I don't
You
think I can
rely
get
on,
much better than he.
of course. So you rely on other people to do that, but at the end of the
Oh,
day,
yeah.
if something gets published that that is a little bit off track, off the rails, it's your responsibility.
Yeah, but I don't think we. I think we're. I don't. I think we.
You never had an experience like that with anything yet?
Not really. No. I mean, we've been pretty um, careful, conservative, halachic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't stray beyond our halachic boundaries.
I understand, obviously,
But that's not what we do. That we wouldn't consider such.
Absolutely. So let me speak about Rabbi Sachs for just a couple of minutes.
Please.
Was it a surprise when he passed away? Was it suddenly? And what did it mean? What did it mean?
Sudden. It was sudden. We knew that he was fighting cancer 30 years, 20 years ago, and 10 years ago, and he thought this was another. He was working on the Chumash, and we were talking every week, twice a week. And he said, "Yeah, I'm going in. We'll deal with this when I get out."
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And, we were shocked. We were very shocked.
So did he leave a lot of material that has not been published yet?
We're working on it, but yes.
And in the case of Rav Steinsaltz, so is that the same? A lot of stuff that hasn't been published yet.
Similar, yes. I mean, some has to be translated. In the case of Rav Steinsaltz, we have to do translation. We do that together with the Steinsaltz Center.
I mean,
whereas with Rabbi Sachs, of course, we do it in English, the original English, and translate back to Hebrew. You know, he's become. I mean, a lot of his recent work has become bestsellers in Chiloni bookstores in Israel, which is quite amazing.
What about the non-Jewish world? Is there any market for the English books in the non-Jewish world? Is that something that's on your scope?
There is. I'm sure there is, but you
don't. That's not your target. You don't aim for that.
You know, we're not aiming to. We're absolutely not aiming to produce stuff for Gentiles. I mean, I'd be delighted if they all bought it.
That's a big market.
Yeah, I'd sure be happy if they bought it, but no, I don't. We don't target them in the work we do.
I don't know. I heard a while ago. I don't know which. I heard that the Talmud in English is very popular in South Korea. Have you heard that?
Yeah. There was this rabbi who was there in the 50s. I can't remember his name, but he did the best of Talmud, type of thing. And, it's
I just think
it's kind of like the Reader's Digest.
I heard that. Listen, I heard that studied, and what can I tell you? It's if you're exposed to the Talmudic way of the thought processes and the thinking, it's very fascinating. And I can imagine a population that has some higher education is very enamored by it. I would think that could explain that.
Yeah, it's like it reminds me that a lot of Israelis after the army they all go to Asia or South America, and some soldier that was some former soldier was in India, and he said some Indian fellow said, "How many Israelis are there?" He said, "Oh, 6 or 7 million." He said, "No, not in India, in Israel." So I think as one British foreign secretary said about England, we punch above our weight.
I just saw something on a news program where they asked people to guess how many Jews there are in the world, and most guesses were between 200 million and a billion. But that's the nature of the magic, I guess, of the Jewish people, and I guess it's reflected in the books that you publish. It's a big responsibility that you have, and you're coming out.
Yeah, I think it is. It is a big responsibility, actually. I hadn't phrased it like that. I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but yeah, I think that's why we are very careful about what we publish and how we publish. I mean, we probably in our Magid section. Koren we reserve for the Tanakh, our new Tanakh, which, by the way, is just brilliant. Rabbi Sachs's translation of the Torah is the most. It is the most eloquent, beautiful translation, and accurate that has ever been produced. It's up there with King James in terms of eloquence. But to say the new Koren Tanakh is is wonderful. But in terms of that, we had 60 people working 7 years on that, mostly editors correcting and changing and correcting it. So yeah, we have a huge responsibility.
Yes, pressing it on to a new generation of young people. The time goes on and people come of age.
That's why we did the Tanakh as we did. You can take a academically good but boring text. You can make corrections to a flowing text, but you can't make a boring text good. And it was important to us that we get this new translation of the Tanakh for a new generation, for a younger generation.
Right.
Not dumbed down at all. We're bringing them up to this level, but it is so readable. It is so readable.
Yes.
That's the most important thing. I mean, I don't know if you've seen it, but the new Tanakh.
Yes, I have it. I have it. It's actually, it's on my desk at home. I actually have it. And like I said at the very outset, the first time I got the Quran Siddur originally when it first came out. And, I was taken by the font. I thought it was very creative and very appealing. It makes you want to daven.
Yeah, that was the idea, actually. It's very funny. There's a lot more commentary in the Machzorim than there is in the Siddur.
Mm-hmm.
And Rabbi Sachs told me, when he brought out the Siddur originally in the United Kingdom, he was arguing with the people there because the powers that be in the UK back in the 90s didn't want to have commentary. And he basically got to fight for every line. So when he came to do the Machzorim, he said, Matthew, how much commentary do you want? I said, Reb Sachs, you're asking me how much commentary you want. It goes the other way around. How much commentary do you want to put in? He says, we do have bums on seats for 2 days. I think rather a lot.
Yeah, fantastic. So, I appreciate you spending some time with us, Mathew Miller of Quran Publishers. Fascinating insight into the mechanism that goes into communicating with the next generation of Jews all over the world. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Look forward to speaking to you again, and God willing, we'll be speaking to some of your authors in the coming weeks as well. Okay, all the best. Be well.